had studied Black history, said her line was supposed to be, our ancestors made a trip below decks in chains and never got to see any of this. So she substituted one word that threw the whole scene off, and I was very protective of her writing. She said, our ancestors made this trip. So, hold it! Your ancestors didn't go to Acapulco. So we straightened it out. Our ancestors made the trip below decks in chains and not saw any of this. And that was a very heroic moment for Mr. Lange. I think he probably came from you.
That episode that was about with Isaac's history lesson is on your stateroom televisions. I actually watched it a couple days ago. I did, yeah. Julie McCoy, she was slapping her leg, two more along with it. Yeah, she was. But yeah, so that episode is you can't watch it on your stateroom television. It's a good episode. It's a really good episode. Yeah, it's a win. Congratulations. Also, we got another question. More back to the question. Next question. Are you all retired, and how often do you see each other?
Well, in this, one of the great things about being an actor is there's no mandatory retirement age. So you go until you absolutely can't. And when you asked if we're still doing things, Ted and I, in this last year, and it was mostly occasioned by the pandemic when so many actors like ourselves were thrown out of work, formed this limited liability company with a couple of other people that we know and have worked with. And our whole plan was to start helping regional theaters, small regional theaters that were going broke during the pandemic, because if you can't get people into the theater, you can't make any money. And a lot of them were dying. So our collective minds got together and said, we've got to find a show that can comply with COVID protocols, won't be hard to produce, can travel. And the show that we came up with was a show that James Whitmore had done 50 years ago called Give 'Em Hell Harry, which is about Harry Truman. And so we started doing it. I was playing Harry Truman. And Ted and I just were in Indiana. He just directed me in Give 'Em Hell Harry there, and we've done it all over the country. He and I were going to go out and tour in a wonderful play called I'm Not Rappaport, which we had done in Syracuse, but of course the pandemic put the kibosh on that. So the answer is yes, and that is really unique to Val. Because I mean there's camaraderie with other shows, but Bernie has been in Ted's place. I go to see Ted's place. I was just talking to Cindy about doing a play together. So I mean this is an ensemble that has never disbanded. And I don't think we never will.
Okay, I will. Thank you. Everybody's a director. Anyway, just a few weeks before coming here, I was doing a play in New York. So, the question, would you ever think about retiring? I said, God will tell me when I can retire. I will never retire voluntarily. Anyway. When was the last time I smacked you? Well, that was great fun. And before I did that play, I played a Catholic priest on Grey's Anatomy. Any rabbis out there? I did not convert. Just want you to know.
I'm not retired. At least not by choice. I work for Princess Cruises, obviously, as a celebrations ambassador, which has just been an amazing opportunity. And I'm also writing and producing as well, and I have some projects that are in a very exciting place. So one of them involves NASCAR. I know, me, NASCAR, like And then there's a few others that are in a really exciting place development-wise that I'm hoping to share soon.
Tell them about the thing we did together, the pilot.
Tell me about the thing you guys did together, the pilot.
So I have a writing partner named Leah Mangum. Her husband is Jonathan Mangum, for anybody who watches Let's Make a Deal.
Yeah.
So Leah and I wrote a pilot that's called Take It From the Top. It's on YouTube. That Mr. Lange was our dramaturg and also directed the show, and he is obviously amazing. But it's a fun show, and it's got some great people in it, so, including this one.
If I can, I have to say a word about Bernie's show. The title of the show is called Two Jews Talking. It's Bernie and Hal Linden. Okay? Between the two of them, they are 200 years old. All right? Now,
At least.
It's two small one-act plays. It runs about 70 minutes. And Ted's seen it, and it's hysterical. Okay? And it's two of, let's be honest, two comic legends, okay? So, listen to this.
Will you put that in writing?
I've been saying to Bernie since we got on the ship, I said, Bernie, this is the perfect place to do that show. It's easy to do. You can do it out, you don't need to do it in a big stage like this, you can do it out where Ted so embarrassed himself on But I say, you know, it's only 70 minutes, about the length of a club act. And I said, why not? And he said, oh, I'm terribly concerned that there would be anti-Semites in the audience. I would like all of the anti-Semites to stand up now, please, and tell Bernie that you'll never come and see his show. Are you kidding me? This is Bernie Coppell. This is not some schmuck. Well, I take that back because I know I'm better than you. But no, I mean really, this show is so perfect for something like this. Are you kidding me? Hal Linden, Bernie Coppell on a cruise? You wouldn't come see that? And you know, first of all, are there really any anti-Semites left that are not trying to see this one? Please. I mean, it's not, you're not asking him to perform a bris or anything. It's just,
Let me get back to these questions. I know they want to ask questions too. Let me get back to these questions. Did you all steal anything from the ship? Did you keep any souvenirs from the years while you were on it? Lauren wants it.
I'm not gonna call it stealing. But on when the very end of the show, like when we actually wrapped and they tore down the set all around us and gave us sandwiches on a paper plate and said, oh yeah, thanks. Remember that day? I took a set piece that, you may recall, I was replaced by Judy McCoy. So the cruise director's door now at the end said J. McCoy, just in case it was either one of us, I guess. And so I have a sign that says J. McCoy, cruise director.
When you direct a show, I was lucky enough to direct television, and the first show I directed was on Love Boat. You've seen those clappers? I didn't steal this, but this is a wonderful tradition that they do in show businesses. When it's your first directorial effort, they give you the clapper with the last scene and act on the clapper, and then the crew signs it. All right, and so I've got that, and I just have to say my first scene was with Fred that I directed. My first scene was with Fred and Susan Strasberg. Okay? So this is the first time, I've been directing theater for years, but this was my first television directing thing. I was a little nervous. We rehearsed the scene, and I noticed that Susan Strasberg missed a beat that was a comedic beat. So I said, well, I'm not going to go tell her father's Lee Strasberg, one of the premier guys in acting. So we'll just rehearse it again, because she'll see the beat. We rehearsed it again. She missed it again. Oh man, I'm gonna actually have to, direct her. So I went over to Susan Strasberg, the daughter of Lee Strasberg. And I said, Susan, there's this beat here. Could you hit that beat there when we do the scene again? And it seemed like an hour had gone by before she answered me. But it was only 5 seconds or whatever. And she said, yeah, sure, of course. Well, after that, I was gold, baby. And we rocked and rolled.
I gotta tell you this about Teddy's direction. He campaigned, I think, for years. Please let me direct. And I said, well, I don't know. And they just did not let him direct. Finally, they said, okay, you can direct. So he's directing this particular scene between Alejandro Rey and a beautiful lady. And he is a swordsman. Not necessarily in that sense. But he is suspecting me of having some interest in his girlfriend. So he's supposed to be chasing me, and I hide under an area, and his line is supposed to be, you lily-livered coward, which is not easy for anyone to say. So it gets to that point, he's almost got me, and he says, you lily-living cow. So Teddy says, cut. Come on, we're using a lot of time here. Do it again, okay. Action. You living, loving, world. So Mr. Lange says, Alejandro, come here. Whisper something in his ear, and the scene continues. Okay, action. And he gets to that point again, and he says, because of what Ted whispered in his ear, you big chicken! He solved the problem!
Do you remember the name of the episode? Do you remember the name of the episode? Which ones they were?
Which one?
The one that we were talking about. The one.
Do you remember the name of that episode?
I don't remember you.
You know what? They kind of mushed together at a certain point in your memory.
Yeah, 10 seasons.
I can't even remember the name of the Pointer Sister episode. And I wrote it.
Fair enough.
He is one of the most brilliant directors for so
Amen.
many reasons. He comes to work so prepared for every scene. He has such incredible comedic timing. He is an actor's director. He is so generous to his actors. He makes it a safe space to try things and to make mistakes and
Thank you.
And speaking about directing bosses and things, Aaron Spelman, what was he like?
a lovely man.
Remote.
He was remote. He had a history that is astonishing for a gigantic producer. His father was a tailor, an impoverished tailor in a little place in Dallas, Texas. And he wanted to be an actor. He tried to be an actor, and that didn't work. And then he started working with Dick Powell. Remember Dick Powell? I love when the crickets come. And he that's your story. Anyway, he just became the most successful producer in the industry. And he was our great boss for all of these years and gave us the opportunity to do this show.
Well,
All right.
And the other thing about him was that because he had been an actor, I think he had a feeling for actors. And very quickly, our show became an oasis for other actors. They were paid well. Every so often, they got to take one of these fabulous trips. And I didn't know him that well because I was pretty low on the food chain, and he was dealing with larger stars, and that's fine. But everybody was well treated on that show, and the show had a reputation for treating actors well, and that's something that was somewhat rare in the industry. The only impression that I had, the one thing that he could not tolerate, that he couldn't countenance, was betrayal. And too often, it's a common suicide mission. Actors get on a hit show, and somehow they cannot deal with this sudden success. And they'll get too big for themselves, or they'll start saying things about the producer, or they'll walk off the show. And of course, Aaron had that with stuff like Charlie's Angels. Farrah Fawcett walked off the show after becoming a big star. And I think that was something that he always had a hard time with. Now, in our case, that wasn't necessarily the case. But even though he was, as Bernie said, remote, and we saw him rarely, and he often didn't even see us, we were always, I think, well treated. And again, if you're in this business for a long time, that's the exception and not the rule.
One of my favorite stories about him, which I learned way, way later, my mom and I would always bring to Christmas for he and his family. She would make a huge Christmas stocking about my size, and we would fill it with things for the kids. We would fill it with, we liked making chocolate chip cookies, so we would, what do you give the man who has everything, the literal biggest house in the world, which is his private residence? So we would bake, and we would do cookies and cakes and fill this stocking up. And he was so appreciative every year. And it wasn't until years later when I read his biography that I learned that he grew up impoverished, like Bernie said, living above a bakery. And because his family couldn't afford food, the bakery would bring up all their leftover sweets at the end of the day, so he hated sweets. Hated. But I would have never known that, because every time it was a lovely thank you note and he would call, so.
Afraid to fly, so he never took a cruise with us because he could never get to the ship.
He was about to get on a plane one day, and his mother made him promise not to get on that plane, and the plane crashed. So he never flew, and that's why he had such a big house. He said, I don't vacation other places. My house is my vacation.
Well, he did travel once, I remember, because we normally shot out of Los Angeles, San Pedro if we were on location. But at one point we were sailing out of Miami. I think it was Miami or Fort Lauderdale, I'm not sure. Anyway, Aaron doesn't fly, but he wanted to come because it was a fairly big production. So he did what anybody would do. He bought a train. He bought a train and took it across the country. Not a big train, you know, but still a train and an engine, you know. And you know, that's what he did. Because he could.
All right.
He did come on the ship. He was on the ship a couple times.
You just buy a train. Gotcha, gotcha. So that's about all the questions I have from the guest. I have a couple more questions for you though. What is one of the funniest moments that's happened on set while you were filming? maybe while you were on a ship? Because you weren't always filming on a ship, you weren't always on set. So what was one of the funnier things?
We were often on the set. We were often there. I remember us, before Jill was, when Jill was just a passenger as the captain's daughter. You were not yet a crew member, however that worked. What was your job? Yeah. But I remember the four of us standing in many lines in Gavin's office, standing on a 4-inch piece of tape that the four of us had to fit on. And those were some pretty funny times. We did crack up a couple times, didn't we, guys?
My favorite is
there was some giggling.
When Henry Coleman had to come down and threaten Ted, because Ted wouldn't stop laughing.
I got the giggles. You do not want to get the giggles. And yeah, we got the giggles, and I laughed from 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we broke for lunch, and I thought I was good after I came back for lunch, and I was not good.
He was supposed to be sleeping in a little cot. There was a flood on the ship, and everybody was in the captain's office, and so you would see Ted's cot with him in it, and you would just see that little tushy laughing. That's the day you knew you were famous.
Yeah, that was it. I knew they couldn't fire me at this point, so I just enjoyed the laugh. It was a good laugh.
No, loads of good moments, years and years of memories made. Last question, one last question. Looking back on your time on the Love Boat, what are you the most grateful for?
Clearly the ensemble, but there's one more thing that we have not talked about, and generally when we have these forums, the questions are who was your favorite guest star, what was your favorite destination, and also, but there's one thing, and I think it's important since this crowd is so enthusiastic and has been so dedicated and loyal, and this is something that only could have happened on a Princess ship that was empowered by the Love Boat, and this happened to me when we took our trip to the Far East, and the last place we were going to shoot was Japan. Now, at that time, my two older kids, not my daughter Monica was with me on this cruise, but my two older kids, were going to join with me in Japan. And to get them over there, because they were 10 and 8, we needed somebody to fly with them. Well, it turned out that there was a nanny that we knew who worked for another family, and her name was Gloria Malloy, and she was from Oklahoma, but she was half Japanese, and she'd never been to Japan. And so we said, well, all right, Gloria, you bring the kids over. And we started to think about this, and we thought, well, Gloria's still got relatives in Japan who she's never met, and they've never met her. So through the consulate, we were able to arrange a visit to her cousin or uncle or whatever it was. And so my two kids and I and Gloria went to see this Japanese family. Never met her. She spoke no Japanese. They spoke no English. When we arrived, it was as if she was coming back from the war. I mean, it was just, oh, Gloria! I mean, it was just wonderful. We sat there for 2 or 3 hours. Nobody understood each other, and it was constant communication. We all got it, okay? Except me, because the host kept pouring me big tumblers of Suntory whiskey, which I drank because I didn't want to be rude. Well, later in the ambulance, that wasn't such a good idea. But now think about this. Gloria Malloy, United States citizen, half Japanese, her family reunited, and I don't know what happened to Gloria, but I assume she might have kept in touch with us. Would that have happened anywhere but on the Love Boat? That's an opportunity you'll never see in one of our clips. But to me, that's the most important and poignant moment I ever had on the show, because I said, my God, we're actually doing something good here that transcends enjoying the show and putting on, an entertaining evening. And again, this is not something that could have happened anywhere else, but because of the partnership between Princess and Love Boat and the rest of the world.
I used to say about the glory of John Forsythe, who guested on the China show, the China Wall. I'm a tennis player, and I was in Monaco, and John Forsythe was in Monaco, and there was a man who had a monumentally gorgeous, multi-zillion-dollar yacht. And he invited Forsythe and Wayne Rogers and myself for lunch one day. I said, oh, this is really wonderful. So lunch is over, and the man is very happy after eating his wonderful meal, and so are we. And he's sitting on the indoor